It was this landmark study, published in 1953, that radically changed our view about the development of heart disease forever. A series of 300 autopsies performed on U.S. battle casualties of the Korean War. Average age? 22. 22 years old, but 77% of their hearts had gross evidence, meaning visible to the eye evidence, of coronary atherosclerosis, hardening of their arteries. Some of them had vessels that were clogged off 90% or more. As an editorial in the Journal of the American Medical Association concluded, this widely cited publication dramatically showed that atherosclerotic changes appear in the coronary arteries years and decades before the age at which coronary heart disease becomes a clinically recognized problem, before symptoms arise. Follow-up studies on the hearts of thousands more soldiers over the subsequent years confirmed their results. How young does it go? Fatty streaks, the first stage of atherosclerosis, was found in the arteries of 100% of kids by age 10. What's accounting for this buildup of plaque even in childhood? In the 80s, we got our first clue, the now famous Bogalusa Heart Study, looking at autopsies of those dying between the ages of 3 years old to age 26, and the #1 risk factor was cholesterol. You could see the stepwise increase in the amount of their arteries covered in fatty streaks as the level of bad cholesterol in the blood increased. As powerful as this was only looking at 30 kids. So they decided to study 3,000. 3,000 accidental death victims, ages 15 through 34. After thousands of autopsies, they were able to produce a scoring system, able to predict advanced atherosclerotic lesions in the coronary arteries of young people. The higher your score, the higher the likelihood you have these lesions growing in your heart. So if you're in your teens, 20s, early 30s, and you smoke, your risk goes up a point. If you have high blood pressure at such a young age, that's 4 points. If you're an obese male, 6 points. But high cholesterol was the worst. If your non-HDL cholesterol, meaning your total cholesterol minus your good cholesterol, is above like 220, that's like 8 times worse than smoking. So let's say you're a young woman with relatively high cholesterol, but you don't smoke, you're not overweight, your blood pressure and blood sugars are fine. At your sweet 16, there's just a few % chance you already have an advanced atherosclerotic lesion in your heart. But if you don't improve your diet, by your 30th birthday, there may be like a 1 in 5 chance you have some serious heart disease. And if you have really high cholesterol, it could be closer to 1 in 3. Bringing your cholesterol down to even just that of a lacto-ovo-vegetarian, and you're down to here. And if you exercise to boost your HDL, you can extrapolate down a little further. So what this shows us is that even in 15 to 19-year-olds, atherosclerosis has begun in a substantial number of individuals, and this observation suggests beginning primary prevention, at least by the late teenage years, to ameliorate every stage of atherosclerosis and to prevent a retard progression to more advanced lesions. You start kids out on a low saturated fat diet, and you may see a significant improvement in their arterial function by 11 years old. Exposure to high serum cholesterol, even in childhood, may accelerate the development of atherosclerosis. Consequently, the long-term prevention of atherosclerosis might be most effective when initiated early in life, as in 7 months of age. Atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, begins in childhood. Remember, by age 10, nearly all kids have fatty streaks, the first stage of the disease. Then, the plaques start forming in our 20s, and get worse in our 30s, and then can start killing us off. In our hearts, it's a heart attack. In our brains, it's a stroke. In our extremities, it can mean gangrene. In our aorta, an aneurysm. If there is anyone watching this video that is older than 10 years of age, the choice likely isn't whether or not to eat healthy to prevent heart disease. It's whether or not you want to reverse the heart disease you already have. We tend to think of rural China as a place with a fraction of our disease rates, forgetting about Africa. Pritikin was 43 when he was told by a cardiologist that he was at great risk of death from a heart attack, so he began to live on a diet patterned after the black population of Uganda. This was a population living off plants that was essentially free from death from heart attacks. After curing his own heart disease with a plant-based diet, he went on to save the lives of thousands of others. What was the data that so convinced him? Last year, the International Journal of Epidemiology reprinted this landmark article from the 50s that started out with a shocking statement. In the African population of Uganda, coronary heart disease is almost non-existent. Our number one cause of death almost non-existent? What were they eating? Plantains and sweet potatoes, other vegetables, corn, millet, pumpkins, tomatoes, and green leafy vegetables are taken by all, and their protein almost exclusively from plant sources. And they had the cholesterol levels to prove it, similar to modern-day plant eaters. To lower our cholesterol through diet, we need to avoid three things: trans fats, saturated fats, and cholesterol. Trans fats are mostly in junk food and animal products. Here's the top food sources of cholesterol-raising saturated fat. That quarter-pounder doesn't come in until 8. Right? It's cheese, ice cream, chicken, then pastries, pork, reduced-fat milk, and then our burger. Whereas cholesterol found in the American diet, number one's not beef, it's eggs and chicken, and then beef, cheese, pork, and fish, before getting to cakes, cookies, donuts, and ice cream. How much should we reduce our consumption of these foods? What are the tolerable upper intake levels for trans fat, saturated fat, and cholesterol? The Institute of Medicine did not set upper limits for trans fat, saturated fat, and cholesterol because any intake level above 0 increased bad cholesterol, LDL cholesterol. Erectile dysfunction and our number one killer, coronary artery disease, are just two manifestations of the same disease: inflamed, clogged, and crippled arteries, regardless of which organ. Atherosclerosis is considered a systemic disorder that uniformly affects all major blood vessels in the body. Hardening of the arteries can lead to softening of the penis because stiffened arteries can't relax normally, open wide, and let the blood flow. So erectile dysfunction may just be the flaccid tip of an iceberg in terms of a systemic disorder. In 2/3 of men showing up to emergency rooms for the first time with crushing chest pain, their penis had been trying to warn them for years that something was wrong with their circulation. Why does it tend to hit the penis first? Because the penile arteries in the penis are half the size of the coronary arteries in our heart. That particular artery is the so-called widowmaker. So the same amount of plaque in the heart that you wouldn't even feel could half clog the penile artery, causing a symptomatic restriction in blood flow. You may not feel chest pain until about here. That's why erectile dysfunction has been called penile angina. In fact, by measuring blood flow in a man's penis, you can predict the results of his cardiac stress test with an accuracy of 80%. Male sexual function is like a penile stress test, a window to the hearts of man. Hyperlipidemia and sexual function in premenopausal women. Those with high cholesterol reported significantly lower arousal, orgasm, lubrication, and satisfaction. Atherosclerosis of the arterial bed supplying the female pelvic anatomy can lead to decreased vaginal engorgement and clitoral erectile insufficiency syndrome, similar to erectile problems in men, resulting in vasculogenic female sexual dysfunction, an important factor of which may be this failure to achieve clitoral tumescence, or engorgement. 33 women suffering from painful periods were placed on a vegan diet for 2 cycles, and experienced significant reductions in menstrual pain duration, from 4 days down to 3 days, and a significant reduction in pain intensity, as well as an improvement in symptoms of PMS like bloating. This was a crossover study, so after 2 months eating vegan, the women were supposed to go back to their regular diets to see if the pain would return. But the women felt so much better that when the researchers said, OK, now we need you to go back to your regular diet to test before and after, several said, "No way, Jose," and refused, even though they were required to by the study protocol. Doctors too often patronizingly think that patients simply won't adhere to therapeutic diets, but when they surveyed these women during the study, not only did they have fewer cramps, but they were losing weight, reported increased energy, better digestion, better sleep. This showed that you don't have to be in some Ornish or Esselstyn study facing certain death after a heart attack to stick to a plant-based diet. It's well accepted by people even when testing more benign conditions. We know that vegetarians tend to be slimmer, but there's this perception that veg diets may be somehow deficient in nutrients. So how's this for a simple study? Let's just analyze the diets of 13,000 people and compare the nutrient intake of those eating meat to those eating meat-free diets. They found that those eating vegetarian were getting higher intakes of nearly every nutrient: more fiber, more vitamin A, more vitamin C, more vitamin E, more of the B vitamins, thiamine, riboflavin, folate, more calcium, magnesium, iron, potassium, while at the same time eating less of the harmful stuff like saturated fat and cholesterol. And yes, they got enough protein. And some of those nutrients, look, are the ones Americans really struggle to get enough of: fiber, vitamins A, C, and E, calcium, magnesium, potassium. And those eating vegetarian got more of all of them. Even so, though, just because they did better than the standard American diet isn't saying much. They still didn't get as much as they should have. I mean, yes, those eating vegetarian ate significantly more dark green leafy vegetables, but that comes out to just 2 teaspoons of greens more. In terms of weight management, the vegetarians were consuming on average 363 fewer calories every day. That's like what people do when they go on a diet and restrict their food intake. But that seemed just like what vegetarians ate normally. So a vegetarian diet could be considered an all-you-care-to-eat version of a calorie-restricted weight loss diet, naturally inducing weight loss and also helping maintain healthy weight status long-term. So just following a vegetarian diet alone, without focusing on calorie reduction, could result in weight loss. How sustainable are more plant-based diets long-term? They are in fact among the only type of diets that have been shown to be sustainable long-term, perhaps because not only do people lose weight, but they often feel so much better. And there's no calorie counting or portion control. In fact, vegetarians may burn more calories in their sleep. Those eating more plant-based diets appear to have a 11% higher resting metabolic rate. Both vegetarians and vegans in this study just naturally seem to have a revved-up metabolism compared to those eating meat. Having said that, the vegetarian diet pattern in this study included eating eggs and dairy, so while they were significantly slimmer than those eating meat, they were still, on average, overweight. As we've seen before, the only dietary pattern associated with, on average, an ideal body weight was a strictly plant-based one.